Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our fourth week together of our course, Curator's Choice. I'm Ann Kinseth, Director of Education here at the Meadows Museum. And we're so happy that you've all taken some time out of your Friday morning, and in Dr. Bray's case, his Friday afternoon, to join us here today. So with that, I'm happy to now turn the session over to the Meadows Museum Curator, Dr. Amanda Dotseth.
Hello, and welcome to yet another iteration of this wonderful lecture series, which I hope you're enjoying as much as I am. It is absolutely my pleasure to introduce Dr. Xavier Bray from the Wallace Collection in London. I will just introduce him briefly, as you've all seen his introduction on the Canvas page, but just some highlights, let's say, some career highlights include posts at the Museum of Fine Arts Bilbao, the National Gallery in London, Dulwich Picture Gallery, and now he is, of course, the director of the Wallace Collection. Among his exhibitions, I will just maybe home in on a personal favorite, which is Sacred Made Real, and I hope some of you had a chance to see that exhibition at one of its venues. It's a personal favorite, and I think was absolutely groundbreaking. And I'll just mention, because I think some of you may remember the exhibition we had recently at the Meadows Museum of highlights from the Bose collection. Xavier also featured some of those paintings at the Wallace Collection some time ago. So we're in good company here. So I will just, we've grouped some of our questions together. Yet again, your questions have formed some wonderful threads that you've pulled from the lecture. And I know that Xavier has also brought along a PowerPoint. So maybe we should start with the question of, what is one of your favorite pieces from the Wallace Collection, besides the ones you mentioned in your lecture, of course?
Well, thank you, Amanda, and thank you for re-inviting me to talk and to answer those very, very good questions, I have to say. And the first question is an extremely difficult one to answer. I suppose my role as director here is to support all the curators who have all their own speciality. And as you probably all know, the Wallace Collection has arms and armor, it has furniture, it has decorative arts, it has paintings. You know, and there's so many things to discover. And I have to admit, during lockdown, it was probably the best time I've ever had, wandering around on my own, picking my favorite pieces. But there is one piece which I will share with you, which, if I can, hold on, maybe I need to do this. Share screen. So I hope you can all see it. Oh, my emails are coming through.
Is it the sculpture?
Yeah, it's a sculpture.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go. So it's this is a sculpture I came to know actually early on in my directorship here 4 years ago. It's by a 16th century French sculptor called Bartholomew Prieur. And we don't know much about him, but he must have known about Italian art and sculpture. And he worked mainly in Fontainebleau outside Paris for the court of Francis I and a bit later. But this is the Acrobat, and it's one of these sculptures that is very hard to date. I mean, it is sort of 1580s, but it could so easily be 19th century. It's so dynamic. It's all about balance. It's all about turning the world upside down. And it's, of course, a beautiful model of the male nude. But it's just so surprising. When I came across it at the Wallace, I felt that it reflected very much the role that one has to play here as the director of a virtual balancing act throughout, and particularly now in today's world, where we are trying to resist not falling into financial ruin, keep our museum open and keep people coming in. And with COVID going on, it is a constant sort of juggling act. So I would say that this sculpture, not only is it incredibly beautiful and tantalizing as an object, it has incredible sort of connection to the present day that we live in. So that would be my favorite object.
I love that. Not only the personal connection, but Gosh, I would have easily put that in the 18th or 19th century. I mean, yeah, wow. Well, we had a couple of really interesting questions about the use of color in specifically related to Kano's work and Murillo's. Is there a comment you could make on their use of color?
That's a really interesting question. So, I mean, Kano, as some of you will know, trained with Pacheco and would have learnt everything he knew about applying color to canvas from his master. He also knew about sculpture. He did polychrome sculpture, so he would have known also about mixing color to paint sculpture. The painting that we have here is quite early in his career, and it has to be said, it's a beautiful painting. It's so focused, so precise, so highly finished, and yet has this incredible color scheme, and it really stands out. I agree with all of you that the color, as much as the form, is a very important contribution to the painting. His style does change, particularly when he meets Velázquez, and it loosens up, becomes more sort of Venetian. But color is always important to Kano. So I think it's definitely something to look into. No sort of technical study has been done on the kind of colors and pigments he used, but it must have been very like Velázquez and his contemporaries. But certainly he would have considered him a sort of Venetian painter in aspiration. And with regards to Murillo, I think what's very interesting about Murillo is that when he's got a good patron or money to spend, he will invest in very high quality pigments. And the Marriage of the Virgin that we have here, the quality of those pigments, particularly the blues, the reds, and it's in good condition. I'm sure it was even better condition 120 years ago. But I think you get a real sense of the luxury quality of the pigment. And I would suspect the person who bought that painting or commissioned it was ready to pay a very high price. And I think with Murillo, you can tell that when it's a quick commission or when it's a commission that involves many more other pictures, he will go for cheaper options to cover more space or more canvas as he goes along. So the quality of the color varies in his paintings. But it has to be said, nobody's really looked into it properly from a technical point of view, from a stylistic point of view, and from a sort of chronological point of view to see how he develops as a colorist. The other thing worth saying is that when Murillo does go to the Spanish Madrid court in 1658-59, he must have been completely overwhelmed by Velázquez and the Venetian collection of paintings by Titian, Tintoretto. And I think his use of color there might have been even more inspired. And it's true that his paintings before going to Madrid were much more sort of earthy colored, much more sort of, browns and blacks and deep reds. Going to Madrid, I think he suddenly realizes that, if he can spend more money on his pigments and lighten up his palette, he'll come up with, wonderful compositions. So that would be my sort of comment on that, but it's worth a further study for sure.
I'll just add that it's fascinating, particularly in the Wallace painting, that those blues are so vibrant. We've talked in previous lectures about the typical Spanish use of azurite and how it turns this kind of blacky greeny kind of color, whereas this lapis lazuli, the ultramarine blue, stays very blue. And I love the connection to Venice because, of course, Venice is the conduit through which the lapis lazuli is entering a lot of the rest of Europe from Afghanistan. So I think this kind of connection to Madrid and like what pigments are used and how those pigments could vary depending on patronage or commission is really fascinating. So I hope someone does work on this some more. One of the other questions, which I was also very curious about, is whatever became of the Duchess of Chevreuse after she moved to Spain?
No, another excellent question. She is a fascinating character and should be the subject of the next Netflix series because she was very much involved in so many conspiracies. I mean, she was a very naughty lady who got involved in all kinds of scandals. I mean, the earliest scandal was encouraging the Queen to play while she was pregnant, and the poor Queen got a miscarriage, and the Countess of Chevreuse was accused of bringing that on. She's involved in all kinds of plots throughout her life. And as I said in the lecture, she was pretty much forced to leave France to go to Spain in disguise. And then she is in Spain. We don't know exactly how long. Some people think that she then goes on to England and Flanders before coming back to France. Some people think that she's pardoned and goes straight back from Spain to France. But her life is an extraordinary sort of up and down in terms of intrigue and conspiracies. All that I know is that she dies in France, just outside Paris, in a convent. That's where she ends up. So she is on the move, but until her death in about 1658, 1659, she does end up sort of retiring in the convent just outside Paris.
I am 100% on board for the Netflix series. It sounds absolutely, or even a historical fiction novel or something. This is how we'll make our squillions, I know.
Yeah, and I mean, the more you read about her, the more you wonder if the painting by Velázquez that we have here is really her. She looks so beautiful and calm and serene. I don't, and she doesn't look at all scheming, but I might be wrong. I might be very naive.
Yeah, but by design, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Velázquez make me look normal.
Yeah. Which is a good question as well, because does Velázquez do that? Does he tidy you up, or is he truly a realist, or is he somebody who will, make you look good? And that's another interesting question in itself.
Very interesting, and really one that is difficult to answer unless you have sort of contemporary descriptions of people's appearances or something like that to compare, which I know we do for Goya, but yeah. So a number of the other questions related to a subject very close to my heart, which is the kind of 19th century lives of these artists and a kind of historiographical and collecting history questions. So we had a question about the interest in England, interest in Spanish art in England, specifically in the 19th century. And if that might have related to Queen Victoria's court, or specifically to her relationship with Eugenia de Montijo, who married Napoleon III. So was any of that kind of interest in Spanish art perhaps somehow related to the court situation under Queen Victoria?
Well, I mean, the fascination for Spanish art from Great Britain really starts almost in the 17th century. Murillo was actually collected by British merchants in London and also in the country, just as much as Dutch and Flemish merchants. So there was definitely sort of the export of Spanish art in that way. And then throughout the 18th century, we have quite a lot of British, travelers and diplomats going to Spain and buying works of art. And you do see quite a consistent a trickle of Spanish art coming into England. I think where it really takes off is during the Peninsular War, when the British invade Portugal and try and push out the French Napoleonic forces out of Spain. And that's where you get many examples of British military soldiers and collectors taking advantage of being able to buy rather than looting, like the Maréchal Soult, who was the most outrageous French general who just took things. The British, in true English style, like to negotiate and buy things or trade, of course, at very cheap prices. So you do suddenly see a massive influx of Spanish paintings into Great Britain between 1808 and 1815. And then you do get this French sort of fascination for Spanish art. One, because of Louis Philippe, the king, he actually sets up a Spanish gallery, La Galerie Espagnole. And I think it all seals up really with the marriage of Napoleon III and Eugénie. Eugénie is a fascinating character. I mean, she is very relevant to the Wallace because she loved anything to do with Marie Antoinette, to the extent that she organized the first exhibition on Marie Antoinette and what she loved collecting. And indeed, we have many pieces that originally belonged to Marie Antoinette and went through Princess Eugénie. And actually, Richard Wallace was a very good friend of Napoleon III and the Empress. And as you all know, when they were sent into exile from 1870 onwards, they actually lived here in just outside London in a place called Farnborough. So I think the relationship between Queen Victoria, Princess Eugenie, and Napoleon III is indeed very close. Whether it had a role in the collective Spanish art, not exactly directly, definitely in what it was to do with Spanish fashion, such as dress and flamenco and Spanish dance. But by the 1850s, one would say Spanish art was very fashionable, and the Beaux collected Spanish art from then on. So I think it was anything Spanish was very à la mode as such, and that continued for quite a long time and still is in a way. There's something about Spain that we all think of: bullfighting, flamenco, and tapas. There are these sort of general ways of thinking about it. But I think the link is there, but I think it's the collective Spanish art in this country really goes quite far back.
Yeah, I have often taught this phenomenon as this sort of fascinating combination of demand and supply meeting kind of halfway. A follow-up question that I think is very interesting that actually just came in this morning and relates to this is about what kind of happened to make Velázquez the bigger name now, the bigger name over Murillo, where it sounds like in the 19th century it was kind of flip-flopped.
Yeah, no, and that's another interesting question, which I think one can safely come up with an answer for that. Murillo was a phenomenon for British collectors, to the extent that quite literally now we're about to publish with the Wallace Collection and the Center for Hispanic Studies, which I think you all know very well because they've helped with exhibitions at the Dallas Museum, the Meadows Museum. We're publishing a whole sort of series of lectures about collecting Murillo in this country. And at one point there were more, well, still are, there are more Murillos in this country than back in Spain, which is extraordinary. I think there was, for the English, they saw a lot of Italian art in Murillo, the sort of Raphael sweetness, which they could, associate themselves with. They could really sort of relate to that. But as Murillo slowly goes out of fashion, let's say from the 1860s, 1870s, Velázquez, who wasn't so well known because a lot of his pictures were kept back at the Spanish court. They didn't leave the churches like the Murillos did, and there was, in a way, the Murillo market was almost over flooded. A Velázquez market wasn't so flooded, and you had to go to Madrid to really get to know Velázquez. And as people visited Madrid, Manet, the painter included, from the 1860s, and realized what a great painter he was, he became the painter of painters. He became the modern painter. He became the sort of father of Impressionism. And then I think that's where suddenly you push aside the religious beauty of Murillo and replace it with that much more realistic, immediate style of Velázquez in the portraits, in the way he paints his Venus. And I suppose the climax is when the National Gallery acquired at an extraordinary price the Rukeby Venus, the wonderful Venus that is now at the National Gallery, which the American museums were desperate to buy, but luckily it was saved for the British nation. So you have
I can think of one that would be happy to have it.
So I think that's what happens. There's a sort of shift, and Velázquez takes over. And I would say that Velázquez is still very much reigns as a supreme Spanish artist. I think the religious Catholic sentiment people still find quite difficult in Murillo's work.
I was thinking about even American collectors, particularly Protestant collectors at the Gilded Age, they were often buying portraits and things like that just because the religious content was. But I'll just add that for those of you who know the Meadows collection, our Murillos kind of tell this story in an interesting way as well. The small crucifix was actually can be traced to Flanders during Murillo's lifetime. So it's a good example of how far Murillo's reach was even in the 17th century, whereas Velázquez had to be, quote, rediscovered because, as Xavier was saying, because people had to actually go to Spain to see his works. And of course, the Jacob painting, for example, in the Meadows collection came via Britain. So even the kind of Meadows collection of 5 Murillos kind of tells this kind of collecting history story as well. So another question that we have, I don't see any in the chat box. So if anyone has any additional questions, now is the time to ask. There were some questions about, I think you mentioned the Montañés and his involvement in the sculpture of, I know, I was hoping you would bring that one. So yeah, could you say some more about Montañés?
It was a good observation and very good question, and one that I embarrassingly omitted to sort of bring in, but indeed the wonderful equestrian sculpture of Philip IV, on horseback, which is now just in front of the Royal Palace of Madrid in the Plaza de Oriente, was designed and made by the workshop of Pietro Tacca. But Pietro Tacca said that, I'm not coming over to Spain to do your portraits. You better send me a good likeness. And the only good sculptor, really, I shouldn't say that, but the sculptor that was well known, and that, of course, Velázquez really revered and respected, because his father-in-law Pacheco would have painted his sculptures, and I sometimes wonder if even Velázquez painted his wooden sculptures, his polychrome sculptures. He was called to Madrid in 1634-35 to make a portrait of Philip IV, and here is Velázquez's portrait of Montañés, making what appears to be a model out of earth, out of clay, of Philip IV. You just see beautifully sketched in, and it's a great piece. It's not only showing Velázquez sketching out the face of Philip IV, as he probably would have had to do when he sketched out the face of Montañés, but then suggesting that it is unfinished and at the same time a piece of clay. So he's playing with different sort of illusions. It's one of the great portraits that not many people look at, because it looks just very dark and black, but it's one of the most magnificent portraits by Velázquez that is now still at the Prado. So that's the relationship, definitely, that clay model would have been sent to Pietro Tacca so that they could then use it for the equestrian horse sculpture.
Well, is it right that Velázquez designed or had some involvement in designing the form of the sculpture? Or
I don't know. I always feel it's just the head.
Like
send me the head. I'll do the horse and the rearing horse that I can. Yeah. So I think it'll be just the head, really. But it would be interesting to look at the contract if there is anything that survives. I think all we have is letters between the ambassadors, saying this is what's happening, and we're getting on with it.
Mm-hmm. So do you know if Montañés went to Italy, or was
no, definitely not.
He just sent the model?
He took the train from Seville to Madrid, made the sketch, and then took the train back in 3 hours. That's all he did.
And we pretend that we live in a global world, and this is very, very similar to what we would do now. Yeah. There was a question about the content the Wallace has available online, and in terms of lectures and things like that. Could you comment on what you all are up to?
Yeah, I thought I'd take a shot of my own screen with the website. It's luckily, we have so little money to do anything exciting, unlike the Met, who spent millions on their website. But we did spend £50,000, luckily, about a year and a half ago, just to make our website look a bit more friendly. So that was good. But we realized that during lockdown that, in order to have the infrastructure to do anything online, we really needed to build that up. So we've done our best. A lot of my staff were on furlough. They're slowly coming back. We do online courses. We are about to do a proper, what we call a sort of like a hub, where we're going to look into one of our great cabinet makers, somebody called Riesner, German, but worked in France for Louis XV, and made the most beautiful furniture. And we have one of the best collections. We've been working on this cabinet maker for the last 8 years. And this is going to be a display, but as not many people can come in, we're going to try and bring the display to life through a series of online talks and lectures, and hopefully that will bring in a much bigger audience. So we're really wanting to do that. And then in my lecture, I was talking about plans, which we're working at the moment, but we do have that wonderful painting of Baltasar Carlos by the Studio Velázquez. Somebody asked about the other version. That's the one that from a private collection. That is by Velázquez for sure. Ours, there's been a lot of argument about it, but that would be part of the one of the themes within the conference, is to sort of come up with ideas of why it might be by Velázquez or his studio. But Baltasar Carlos is a fascinating character. And indeed, somebody also asked the question about the fact that he was meant to marry Mariana of Austria. And then when he died and when his mum died, his father ended up marrying the prince's supposed wife. So the early sort of stages of intermarrying Habsburgs here. But he was, Prince Baltasar Carlos was a fascinating character, both as in terms of a prince and the future king, but also very interested in the artistic world that he inhabited, to the extent that Alonso Cano, I don't know if I mentioned that, but Alonso Cano was his drawing master. So it's all very linked. So this conference, which was meant to be a conference, in our lecture theatre, will be online. We're working out how we're going to do it, if we've got the infrastructure yet to do it. And we're going to invite speakers soon. The date at the moment is February. It might change, but I will make sure to email Anne and Amanda to let them know when it is, so that you can all join in. But it should be very interesting, and there'll be an opportunity to bring in, scholars, but also make sure that whatever the speakers can really sort of communicate their passion and their scholarly qualities in a wider sense, because of course, giving a lecture that is too scholarly can be quite dull on Zoom, but if they can liven it up, then all the better. So that's where we're
working on it. But I'm glad that you're going in that direction, and that hopefully we'll be able to tune in to this conference in February. We have just a couple minutes left, but one question did come in about Murillo's virgins, and if they resemble each other because he's using the same model, or is it because they're kind of idealized beauties, let's say?
I mean, there's a lot, the 19th century writers loved Murillo's virgins. Some thought they were beautiful gypsy girls that had been dressed up as virgins. Some people thought that there was his own daughter or wife, because they're so naturalistic looking. They are a bit idealized, so he plays with the natural and the ideal. I think that's what makes him so beautiful. He's able to keep it real and at the same time very serene and classical. So I don't think it's a specific person, but I'm sure he looked at a real beautiful girl that he knew must have been his wife, and then slightly made her features even more beautiful. So that's what I would say on that one, really.
That's my take as well, and I would say it even kind of would cover paintings in the Meadows collection like Santa Justa and Santa Rufina that have this kind of similar sweet, pretty amalgamation of beautiful women with similar kind of hair styles and that sort of thing. So I think that's about it. Thank you. Anne will jump in and thank you, Xavier, as well.
I'll just say one last thing. Somebody did ask about Richard Wallace and the fourth market.
Oh yes, sorry.
Collectors, and I mean they were unbelievable collectors. They had the money. They were always seemed to have been in the right place to buy very high quality works, sometimes individual works, and sometimes whole collections. And I just wanted to finish with something we've just finished today. We've just installed in our restaurant, because nobody's coming to our restaurant at the moment, although we are reopening it, so you can have your cappuccino and things like that. But we've installed one of the great pieces of arms and armor that we have here, which was in this amazing French collection in the 19th century, which Richard Wallace bought en masse as a whole for quite a big sum of money. But he probably just wanted this piece, which is a late 14th century medieval equestrian armor that is the most complete that exists and survives. and it's the most dramatic and very sort of chivalric image of this knight with his sword. So we're trying to get the press to see it not only as a great opportunity to see this beautiful work in natural light, but this is now the symbol of our fight against COVID-19. That's what we're trying to see. So let's see if it works.
I love it. And just for those of you who don't know, a complete set of arms and armor like this from as early as the 14th century is incredibly rare. Yeah, and of course the Wallace has one of the best collections of arms and armor in the world. And if anybody would like more information on that, I strongly encourage you to Google, go to the Wallace's website, Google, I just forgot Tobias's surname.
Tobias Capwell, yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
He's
So
the
yeah,
wonderful curator of arms and armor, and there are some wonderful videos of him.
He's amazing. He's American.
Yeah.
He actually does jousting himself. He has his own horse and armor.
He has his own armor, right?
Yeah, he still actually does it, and we're hoping to get him to do some online talks. So do tune in. I think the best thing to do with the Wallace is put yourself on the newsletter email, and then you'll just find out what's going on, and so you don't miss anything. But he's a brilliant talker and so passionate about the subject.
Yeah.
He brings it to life.
I've taught with his videos quite a bit, actually, because he's very good at dispelling all those myths about, armor not being flexible or weighing too much or whatever. So yeah. Do check it out. I think we're 2 minutes over.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to step in and call it. We're going to go ahead and end the session. Dr. Bray, thank you so much for contributing to this and for all your generosity with your time. We wish you a fantastic weekend. Amanda, thank you for moderating, and I want to thank everyone for attending this morning. Next week, we move into week 5 of our course with Dr. Ketty Guittardo at the Courtauld. She'll be talking about Sir William Maxwell and his collection of Spanish drawings. So 9 a.m. on Monday, Dallas time, you'll be able to access that. And we look forward to seeing you all in a week's time for the Q&A session. So thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.